On Friday, US President Barack Obama, through a letter to Congress, threatened to halt certain agricultural products from the AGOA trade deal within 60 days to South Africa unless a dispute over US imports is resolved. This is the Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight, we dissect the potential trade war and the costs of the outcome to South Africa and the game that South Africa seems to be playing. It's a dangerous one when you pick a fight with a guy who's got access to a red button, and that is Barack Obama. Joining me now, Astral Foods Chief Executive Officer Chris Schutte, Cyril O'Brien, who's Executive Director at the American Chamber of Commerce, and Cyril, researcher at the Economic Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Why are you fighting with us, Cyril O'Brien?
We're not fighting, Bruce. We are trying to settle what has been an outstanding thorn in the flesh of the American people for the last 15 years.
Which is?
Well, they have been trying for the last 15 years to break down the barrier of getting chicken imported from the US into South Africa. Right. And they've never got anywhere. AGOA has now come up for renewal a couple of months ago, and this is the first time ever that the American government has decided that they can exclude sectors rather than just countries. And so this is why South Africa's Agri sector is now possibly going to be excluded.
It's a 7 billion rand threat to South African agriculture potentially here. AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. This doesn't sound like growth or opportunity. It sounds like opportunism on behalf of the Americans.
Well, Section 104 of the AGOA Act says that there must be no trade barriers to American business. And this is what has been, as I said, a thorn in the flesh of the US government.
Is this Rob Davies, our trade minister, protecting guys like Chris Schutte, who grows chickens locally, and goes to Rob Davies and says, please protect my chicken, my chicken patch?
I don't think the minister is actually just protecting
but he is protecting
Astral
Chris Schutte.
Foods. He's protecting jobs in South Africa. I think
that
is
jobs in South Africa at the expense of trade.
Perhaps at the expense of trade, but we are wanting the Americans to be happy because we desperately need AGOA.
Yeah, we need AGOA, absolutely, but at what price? Chris Schutte, what's the position from an industry perspective? You are integrally involved in the negotiations. You've seen this thing from the start. What's up?
Well, first of all, we agree that AGOA is important for South Africa. If you go and analyze the AGOA, about 80% of the benefit of that goes to the automotive industry. Mm-hmm. And the rest of it to agriculture, to certain agricultural products. In order for AGOA to continue and we reaping the benefit, chicken has to pay for it now, because all of a sudden South Africa is this massive market for America, which is a bit of a unknown to us, but now
it's
we had to chip in.
It's about 2 years ago where Rob Davies put in restrictions which was what the quarters, the chicken quarters being imported and being dumped on South Africa by countries like Brazil, by countries like the United States, for example. That's been good for the local poultry industry, hasn't it?
Well, it depends how you look at it. On the one hand, poultry in South Africa is a commodity. It is not in America or in the EU, because they eat certain parts of the bird, and it's more a health habit than anything else. In South Africa, we eat everything. So any volumes coming into the country will disturb the balance or the balance sheet of poultry, and being a commodity, it will force the price down. So it's actually limited our ability to grow and further invest. And that's not just from Brazil, it's now from the EU. The key thing here is when we were in Paris negotiating, we offered the Americans a quota of 65,000 tons of chicken per annum into South Africa. So we're giving away market. It's about 4.5% of the local market. We're giving it away because we believe it will be additive. You know, it won't replace anything else, because they will not compete with the EU, because the channels where the chicken will go from AGOA versus the EU chicken is two different channels. Part of the agreement was that the benefit of this leg quarters coming into South Africa will go to previously disadvantaged people. And that is a new and a different market to the dumped leg quarters from the EU.
We have a looming food crisis. I mean, anybody who's flown over South Africa in the last 6 months will know the 50 shades of beige that the landscape is. That is where the grain is produced that goes into the chickens to grow the protein. We've got to try and get some sort of food benefit into this economy. But if they're being so reasonable, why is Barack Obama getting involved? I mean, this is quite serious. This isn't some mid-level trade official writing to another mid-level trade official or a trade secretary to our Minister of Trade and Industry. This is Barack Obama, the guy who's got his finger hovering at a moment's notice over a great big red button that can destroy the war with nuclear warfare. This suggests that there is something else at play here, Carol.
Well, we went through a 30-day out-of-cycle review.
Which is, in English, to those of us who don't go through 30-day out-of-cycle reviews.
It was to look at barriers to American business, because this is one of the criteria of AGOA, that there cannot be barriers to American business. And various things were looked at, and the DTI worked with us. We looked at the IP policy, for instance, which was one of the issues we had raised. And we were happy when they said to us they will be TRIPS compliant, which people
TRIPS compliant is?
Trade-related international policy principles, which is the minimum standard of intellectual property compliance. So we were happy with that. But then we missed the deadline, and Chris will bear me out. The 15th of October was a huge deadline in terms of we've got an agreement on the table, let's now implement. And the 15th of October was a date, a timeline, and we missed that.
It feels, Cyril, as if something else is at play here. This isn't about chicken, this isn't about agriculture, this isn't about import-export, there's something else at play here.
You know, Bruce, I think it's an interesting time for AGOA. As you know, when the renewal came up, you know, there was a lot of questions being asked whether South Africa should be part of AGOA, whether they should still benefit.
But surely it makes sense to benefit. Do we all agree it makes sense to be part of AGOA?
Well,
not at all costs.
There will be a day where the benefits we currently have could be less than giving away market share.
Right now, though, it makes sense to be part of AGOA?
Yes.
Do we agree?
Yes.
Okay, fine. We're moving on.
But, you know, there were these discussions, you know, South Africa is now, you know, almost past the point where they should be benefiting from AGOA. And I think, you know, with this next 10 years, this is a first kind of move where the United States will actually be looking to use AGOA as an actual trade policy tool. You know, previously they just used it, you know, as Carol said, you know, you need to comply with a certain number of...
But that precisely implies that it's more than just trade.
Yes, of course. So I think, you know, as Carol also said, this has been going on for 10, 15 years. And I think, you know, it's just gotten to a point where, you know, South Africa has been delaying or whatever might be the case, where they say, oh, actually, you know, now we need to... You know, we need to get the ball rolling on this.
Is South
we need to make a
really
move.
worth bothering about? From an American perspective, this is what I'm trying to get to. Barack Obama sitting down and actually writing a letter to his Congress to say South Africa's being really naughty. Why does he care? What is the significance of it, Chris?
Well, it's very interesting to us that poultry industry is 40 to 50 times our size. All of a sudden, 65,000 tons is threatening a whole lot of things, the whole AGOA. And we find it difficult to believe it. Maybe it's, and remember, there were never trade barriers on America. There was an anti-dumping on leg quarters.
Yeah. But it depends on your interpretation. If you're a Delaware chicken farmer, you see that as a trade barrier against America.
Yeah, but on the other hand, when we were in Paris, we offered the Americans a higher quota than the 65,000 tons here and said, bring your whole bird at the same price as the leg quarter. They don't want to do that because they want to export certain parts, and that will impact our industry. But still we made the concession. On the other hand is, remember, they farm cheaper than us. Currently, and the biggest input is feed cost. Currently, South African maize is 700 to 800 rand a ton more expensive than American corn. So we start off on a or unbalanced platform, and now we're going to be further dumped with leg quarters at a price that we can never produce a chicken at.
But is it worth holding up AGOA for the benefit of one segment of the agricultural sector? Is it worth it?
Well, let me put it this way. When, again, going back to Paris, I won't forget Paris.
You'll never forget Paris, I'm sure you won't.
So, see Paris and die. So when we negotiated it, and when we reached the agreement of the quota, 65,000 tons per annum, that's actually when the negotiations only started. And there was a number of detail Like, for instance, who will handle the administration? Was it DTI or DAF?
We're going into the technicalities of something which has got a potential to destabilize a relationship between the United States and South Africa. There are some people, Carol, who would say, well, Rob Davies, bit of a lefty, yeah, he's a member of the South African Communist Party. He wants his NBFs, his BFFs, or whatever we call them, best friends, in China and Russia to get any benefit of South African trade with China and Russia. He doesn't really care what happens with America. Is that fair comment?
Well, there's been a lot of anti-West rhetoric at the, coming out from government, and this is also of huge concern to the West.
So is this what this is about?
No, not at all. Okay. Not at all. I'm just saying this is noise, added noise.
Sure.
And we just want, China is one of America's biggest partners. I don't know why South Africa insists we can only look at the East and, not include the West. We should be friends with everybody in South Africa.
Okay, so back then, Cyril, to you, what's really at play here? Is this about the security bill? Is this about South African politics more than it is about drumsticks?
I think drumsticks were kind of the catalyst. You're right, there is more at play. There's been a number of trade barriers, specifically in relation to American-South African trade. There's been a couple of issues, the private securities bill, etc. And I think this is kind of testing the water to see how they can use it, to kind of explore it as a tool for future, to make future inroads in, limiting or eliminating trade barriers.
Yeah. Do we not want completely free trade here, Chris? In years where times are good in South Africa and we have an overproduction, we hope for that one day, we can export freely. In years like this coming year, which is bound to see big shortfalls of maize and of protein production in South Africa, courtesy of a big fat drought that's happening right now, surely we want a little bit of give and take.
Free trade, I think we're talking about utopia. The playing field is not level. Yeah. And that is what makes free trade very, very difficult. For instance, we start off with the input cost here. All my maize is transported by road. We've just been classified as the most expensive road freight company in the world.
Country in the world, yeah.
In the world.
Yeah.
I must transport, nevertheless, I'm paying 800 rand a ton more than the Americans. I'm now paying more because our railroad was given to the mines. It was taken away from agriculture. So I don't have water, I don't have electricity. I have minimum wages imposed on me.
Why should a family living on a government grant of 1,400 rand have to worry about that?
Well, at the end of the day, it creates jobs in South Africa, and this whole AGOA thing was about creating jobs. It is a Growth and Opportunities Act. So we're not going to give you money from America, we're going to open or give you a discount on import levies so that you can grow
markets,
and get access to market. Now you produce locally and you create jobs. Now they want a reciprocal agreement. So you bring your oranges here and we'll bring our chicken, so you win a couple of jobs, but you lose more jobs on the other side.
Carol O'Brien, does this get resolved amicably by the 31st of December? Do we have a happy new year, or is it a new year of discontent?
Happy New Year, Bruce. I have no doubt that everybody's going to work and do their utmost to make sure this happens.
Okay, what is it going to take?
It's going to take compromise, I think, and it's going to take a lot of the will, a lot of goodwill.
On whose part?
On both parties.
Okay, so both parties are at fault here.
I would say both parties need to play ball.
There we go. That part we will leave with Carol O'Brien, Executive Director at the American Chamber of Commerce, despite her accent, and Cyril Prinsloo, Researcher for the Economic Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, and the Astral Chief Executive Officer, Chris Schutte, who the last time we came here, you notice he was giving an eyeball to the desk, was surrounded by a real chicken, but we spared him that pain this time. On more serious issues, there'll be more trade wars tomorrow, but for now, good night.